to me, in 1962 was the beginning of that television career.
And how much of that television career, or that foray into media, because you did radio too, of course,
Yeah.
you're the host of Quirks and Quarks, how much of that was about a platform for environmental issues and your activism?
Not at all when I started in the beginning. At that time, I had just come back from living in the United States for 8 years. Come back to the university, apply for a grant. They say, we're giving you a bigger grant than most people get at your stage, $4,200. This is at a time when my fellow grad students in the States were getting $60,000 to $80,000 grants. NRC in Canada gave me $4,200. And I started looking for jobs back in the States. And to my amazement, what happened is the Americans gave me a big grant that I could keep in Canada. So I stayed in Canada because I got an American grant. But the point is, I was stunned at how scientifically illiterate Canadians were. They had no idea what was going on in genetics and in many other areas. Right. And I felt that I from purely selfish reasons, I said, Canadians better know how important science is so that I'll get a bigger grant. And so my early forays into television were really to try to educate Canadians about why science was important. But thanks to Rachel Carson, there was a second side to the impact of science and technology that you had to deal with.
Which raises an interesting, I don't want to say paradox, but tension for David Suzuki over the years, I would imagine. Because first, a scientist, I think, impartial, and that's almost how you would need to govern yourself as a scientist. And I think as a broadcaster, you're at least supposed to live by the postulate of objectivity, you know, and yet you're also an activist. So how do you bring those worlds together?
I've never separated them. I don't. First of all, the idea of objectivity is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. There is no such thing unless you're a corpse. I mean, the minute you're born into the world, if you're a male or a female, you're going to see the world in a radically different way. If you're born a Christian or an atheist, if you're born in a middle-class family or a poor family, all kinds of things shape the way that we see the world. And why do we care that there's Canadian news? If we're so objective, why do we care whether there's Canadian or American news? Why do we want more gender parity in terms of our hosts if it's all objective? Because the way we grow up shapes the way we see the world. And it's absurd to say that we're objective. I think the important thing is that we have a balance of different worldviews or different values and beliefs, and that we're open about what our values and beliefs are.
Well, some people would say we have to try. We have to try.
To be objective.
Yeah. Even if it doesn't exist. The unattainable goal,
yes,
right?
Okay.
I mean, some people would.
Yes.
Yeah, you've always been outspoken as a broadcaster, at least in the more recent decades. Sometimes, I might say in an alarming way for your audience, I want to play an old television clip of you from 1972, in which you argue that humans aren't really, you'll like this, I think, that aren't really all that different from fruit flies, or more specifically from their offspring, maggots. This is David Suzuki in 1972.
You're born as an egg, and you live in that egg environment, and your parents kind of cut out all the external crap that comes in and protect you and nourish you and clothe you and all that. It's a very nice little egg, and it's comfortable. But at some point, you hatch out and start crawling around and eating stuff on your own. You start reading, you start looking at the tube, you start doing all sorts of things. You hatch out as a maggot. And a maggot can now crawl around. It's got 2 dimensions, and it can ingest food at its will, and it defecates all over the environment. And some other smaller maggots can even eat your defecation and get some nourishment out of it.
There you go. That's David Suzuki from 1972 comparing humans and maggots. It's not the most optimistic view of our species. How have your thoughts about humanity changed since then?
Well, humanity is humanity. You know, I hang out a lot with First Nations people who've taught me a lot, but I keep wanting to shake them and say, stop being so human.